if he did refuse to take part in an interview, the only actual way I was told at the time by lawyers that he could do that was unless they kind of just were lenient with him, the only way to get out of it is by saying, well, you would incriminate yourself if you gave an interview.
Amy Wallace, the co-author of Virginia Giuffre's memoir about her time with Jeffrey Epstein, says that Prince Andrew should lead the charge by sharing everything that he knows about the convicted paedophile. She spoke to Jane Garvey on Times Radio today.
If he does care about that, I think there is more room for him to be more active. And by which I mean, this is a man, well, let's leave aside what he does or does not admit to. He was in those houses. He was on that island. He was on the jets. Those jets were remodeled to have a lot of bedrooms. That was the entire way. They were gutted inside and then bedrooms. They were places to traffic girls. So he saw things that were going on. And if he cares so deeply about this, he could share that information with investigators. This is what happened. Let me validate their experience.
Amy Wallace speaking to Times Radio earlier. The Prince has always denied any allegations. Let's speak to Jack Royston, who's Newsweek's chief royal correspondent. Jack, thank you for being with us. We'll come back to the issue of Andrew in a moment. Firstly, you've read the book as well today. What stood out for you?
Yeah. Well, look, a lot of the actual substantive passages about her allegations against Andrew are not particularly new. In fact, there are some passages that are drawn from sworn depositions that we already had access to through various civil lawsuits in New York. But there are new bits. For example, there's a really moving passage where Virginia actually talks about trying to take her own life and failing in 2022. So round about the time, the same year that she settled her lawsuit with Prince Andrew. And she says she was having nightmares. She got COVID as she was in hospital and she was having nightmares in which she was seeing these men on top of her and reliving the abuse that she experienced. And she talks about having just a voice inside her head telling her that she wasn't strong enough and that she had to give up. But there are also incredibly harrowing details about her early life. She says that she was abused by her father. He denies that. That's included in the book. There are some quotes from him given to the ghostwriter Amy Wallace, who we just heard. And, you know, right from the very, very first chapter, it's a deeply moving, deeply harrowing, deeply upsetting book about a woman whose life was torn apart before she even reached puberty by sexual abuse as a child. She then obviously fell into Jeffrey Epstein's clutches when she was a teenager. And she talks about, you know, fearing she would die a sex slave. She talks about being gagged by Prince Andrew to protect the monarchy's reputation during the Platinum Jubilee. You know, it's not all, you know, bad. There are some, you know, high points. She bursts into tears when she gets told by her lawyer that Andrew settled and that, you know, not only has he settled, not only will she get the money, but what seems to be more important to her in the passages in the book is that Andrew acknowledged that she was a trafficking victim and that she was an Epstein victim in a public statement that he made at that time.
Blimey, goodness me, extraordinary. Just react to what we heard from Amy Wallace there, Jack, who made the argument today that this man denies the allegations against him, but was present in the life of this mysterious guy who we are trying to unpick the crimes of. Help.
Yeah, well, absolutely. Help. Yeah, go to the FBI. I mean, he said in 2019 that he would go to the FBI and help them and cooperate with their investigations. And as far as we know, that never happened.
Why not?
Well, a formal procedure was initiated by the U.S. Department of Justice. It's very difficult to answer the question because there was no definitive confirmation either way publicly. But if he did refuse to take part in an interview, the only actual way I was told at the time by lawyers that he could do that was unless they kind of just were lenient with him, the only way to get out of it is by saying, well, you would incriminate yourself if you gave an interview. So it would be really useful, actually, to have some public guidance on what happened there. Like, you know, did he invoke that defense against cooperating? Or did he give them some kind of evidence and just nobody on either side ever said anything? It would be very, very useful to have confirmation. But as, you know, Amy Wallace says, he was in those houses, and, you know, the house in New York in particular, people who have been there say it's very obvious from the minute you walk in the door that something's not right, because there's artwork of naked women all over it. There's a painting of Bill Clinton in drag. You know, the night when the day when Andrew stayed overnight in New York in December 2010. The paparazzi photographed all these women coming and going from the house. So he was in all the key locations. There's a document saying that he paid $200 for a kind of a massage and yoga, I think it was. So there's a huge amount of explaining that Andrew never even really chipped away at during his 2019 interview with Emily Maitlis. Like, were you offered a massage? Seemingly yes, because he's down on a document as having paid for one. What happened? Who did that massage? Was it a young woman? Were you concerned about her age? Did anything strange happen? Did you turn down an offer of sexual favors? Or alternatively, did you not turn it down? We don't have a detailed account. He went to Florida to stay with Epstein multiple times, which is another key location. What happened during those visits? Like, Epstein seems to have allowed Andrew into his private world, and we know what his private world contained. So why do we not have a clearer idea from Andrew of what he did know? Because Andrew's interview was all about what he didn't know. But did he really have no suspicions? I mean, we know he continued his friendship with Epstein after Epstein was a convicted paedophile. So it's very difficult for the public to believe that Andrew literally had no inkling of an idea when we know he's on record as having misled everybody.
Could you? I mean, an interview really sort of began the downfall, didn't it? Could you see him sort of deciding that actually it's time to give another?
I think it's exceptionally unlikely. I think it is exceptionally unlikely. But this business with him having emailed a police protection officer to say, "Can you basically dig up some dirt on Virginia?" could actually potentially has the potential to lead to a criminal investigation if the Met decide to go for it. And if the CPS decide to go for it, it could lead to charges. And then he might wind up in a position where he has to give another police interview about that self-contained element of this, not necessarily about the whole issue and Virginia's allegations. But the law on misconduct in a public office is actually quite well honed now, because there were a whole load of prosecutions of journalists, of tabloid journalists, about 10 or 15 years ago under Operation Elvedon about corrupt payments, about misconduct in a public office. And many of those journalists appealed. They went to the Court of Appeal. They won in a number of cases, but that case law, those rulings by Court of Appeal judges, fine-tuned and honed the interpretation of what that law is and what it means. So it's right. The parameters of that offence are now much better understood than they were 15, 20 years ago.
Right, blimey, that's really interesting. Jack, thank you for your time tonight. I appreciate it. Jack Royston, who is Newsweek's chief royal correspondent with us on Times Radio tonight. Worth us remembering, isn't it? I mean, it's one of those days, really, the publication of this book, where we are reminded that there are human beings. We can get a bit swept up in the carnival of the story, and we can be fascinated by the characters in it. But the truth is that there are, or what it means for those people and what it means for the institution. Truth is, there are humans, aren't there, at the heart of it, victims at the heart of it. Some of the really sensitive topics as well. And if you are affected by any of these issues, you can get some help. Feedback at times.radio is the place to email. We'll point you in the right direction. If anything you've heard tonight has been too difficult for you or you need some more advice, feedback at times.radio. And if you need urgent support, the Samaritans are always at the end of the phone on 116 123.